Ladies and gentlemen, what a treat that we have in store here on the Sports Report. To kick things off for us here on Sportnarium is somebody that's actually in our chair each and every week, where he has done a phenomenal job now as the host of the Kurt Johansson Show, one of the premier pro wrestling shows around. I mean, he has interviewed a who's who of people, including guests that have come on the show, like the Natural Born Fighter, R.P. Davis, the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus, of course, the team of Born Ready. And he's also a part of the family with Odyssey Pro Wrestling, which is getting ready to set sail here August 7th. And he is a huge part of it now as the play-by-play man, one half of the great team there with Simon Hill. So really excited about this one. A tremendous honor to have him. And without further ado here on the Sports Report, the number one global sports show, Johansson. My friend, welcome aboard.
Thank you for having me. Amazing introduction. I like it. You should be a ring announcer. I know you sat here in this chair, but with that sort of voice and introduction, I can picture it now as a ring announcer. So, yeah, thank you for having me.
Well, you're not the first person that said that. We've had ALP discuss that, and he's actually done his own intro of me on the show here in the past. And obviously, ALP is the booker and promoter of KOW. We've had him on 3 times. And somebody you know very well, a colleague, Ethan Edwards of Odyssey Pro Wrestling, has said the same thing amongst the who's who of people that have come on the Sports Report. But this is a tremendous honor, Kurt, to have you here, because there's a lot of momentum right now with you, because obviously we know the show has been a staple, I think, in the pro wrestling community now for well over a year. But now you're going into a different perspective, a different element now as an announcer with Odyssey Pro Wrestling alongside Simon Hill. Again, somebody who in his own right speaks for itself. But obviously, congratulations on that. And for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportnarium, Kurt, talk about the news here that for August 7th, Odyssey Pro Wrestling sets sail. You're actually going to be on the call. You're going to be calling the card, and talk about that and what that means to you.
It's a tremendous honour, to be honest. I'm very humble at giving such an opportunity. And when I'd been speaking to Rick and the team with OPW, it's amazing. I was always wondering what's my next step into professional wrestling. And a few people have been kind of suggesting commentary. I'm like, I've always enjoyed telling stories. And I think when I'm talking about my interviews and when I'm discussing what I think pro wrestling is, I always expand on the storytelling aspect of it all. So to be able to be sat there alongside Simon, who will be very similar in style, so we're going to have to try and complement each other but not be too similar. I'm looking forward to being able to tell the stories of a brand new company that's been really exciting. They've been doing incredible across social media during such a hard time, and with British wrestling, a lot of things have been going on recently. They've been that positive light, and yeah, I'm just so excited. The roster speaks for itself. Everybody's just so hungry and raring to go, and with all puns intended, everybody's ready to set sail.
That's something we said here on the show over the past few months in talking about Odyssey Pro Wrestling. And Kurt, I'm also curious about this because you're going into a new element. And I know that you have been in our chair now for a while, and you've had a who's who of people that you've interviewed. But I almost have to think, do you prepare differently for something like this? Because it's one thing when you do a podcast, you have the opportunity to edit it, to format it, to change certain things. But it's live. It's live action, and you're going along as everything is happening. I mean, you don't have that opportunity to do, okay, let's do a redo, or let's take one, or if you misspeak, you can always cut the word out. I mean, how is this going to be like in terms of your overall preparation and that adjustment from going into our world into Odyssey Pro Wrestling's world?
It's a good question, to be honest. I always do my research, which is that's what I'll take from the podcast side of things. I like to do the deep dive into people's careers, so I know where I can tailor things across. But like you said, it's going to be live. We did have a lot of discussion whether it was going to be live or if we were going to record it in post-edit. I think both myself and Simon felt live it gives a more natural, authentic feel, in my opinion, which puts more pressure onto myself. Like you said, there's no cuts, there's no edits, family-friendly show, so I'm going to have to make sure I'm on my best behaviour in terms of that. But I just feel you can't beat that first impression on pro wrestling. You can't fake excitement. Like, yeah, if you're an amazing actor, but I think as a commentator, everything's better when it's just raw, natural emotion. And I think it speaks for itself when you can tell if commentary's being done in post-production or if it's live. There's just that different grip to the excitement of the commentator's voice when things are happening. And I'm so excited. And not to say there won't be blips here and there, whether it's from myself or from Simon. I think it's a natural thing and excitement can take over, but it'll be a case of speaking to the talent, wanting to know what story they're trying to tell in their characters, the story they're going to try and be telling inside that ring, and just doing our best. And yeah, we're setting sail. We've got a lot of shows scheduled for the remainder of the year of next year, and I'm just really excited to see not only the journey that Odyssey take, but the journey myself will take. Like, time will help, and I've been used to speaking, whether it's on the show or the various different professional careers I've done, whether it's been coaching football, soccer for you American listeners, it's football here in England, or when I've been doing the public speaking. And again, in those instances, there's only one take, there's no reshoots. The audience that I'm speaking to are just going to hear it there live, and hopefully I can translate that across to the commentary booth.
Sounds like he's on his way to being the next Jim Ross, the next Michael Cole, the next Tony Schiavone. So we know that he is well on his way to joining them. And I'm also curious, Kurt, especially for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportnarium, do you and Simon practice, let's say, calling prior matches, whether it could be anything. It could be a WWE match, it could be an Impact match, it could be an AEW match, or even, let's say, any type of match from the past, whether it's, let's say, the Cumbrian Outlaw Rick Marcus and KOW, or let's say the Natural Born Fighter RP Davis. And do you guys, before August 7th, will you guys practice or call any matches just to kind of get a feel for each other?
You know what? I'm not sure. Simon's really busy at the moment. He's over in Poland hosting a gaming event, which is an amazing opportunity for himself. Like, I'm not sure we'll get into it, but my show's kind of taken more of a slow burn. Like, I've just started my family and I've gone back to work full time now. So trying to balance those things does make it hard to be like, right, let's just sit down and try and call some. So whether or not we try and do that in a dark match, or if we do manage to get some time where we're both going to be free on an evening to do that. But as of now, I think it might be a case of when we're setting sail could be the first time we're talking alongside each other.
Well, I actually think, Kurt, that might make this even more interesting, and why everybody needs to go out and go buy a ticket to watch Odyssey Pro Wrestling and set sail August 7th. And of course, you can follow Odyssey Pro Wrestling on Instagram at Odyssey Pro Wrestling. You can like him on Facebook at Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and you can follow him on Twitter at OPW_UK and find out why we're really excited to see Odyssey Pro Wrestling finally set sail. And we're going to talk with somebody here throughout the show about Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and that's one of the guys that's going to be on the call here for the August 7th card. That's Kurt Johansson, host of the Kurt Johansson Show. Somebody who's done a phenomenal job here covering all the latest happenings in the world of professional wrestling over the past year. And I am the host of the Sports Report, now the station manager here of Sportnarium Radio, the Reverend Tom Bryce. And I think then, Kurt, this makes it even more interesting for August 7th, because let's say you guys go into it and it's almost got an ECW feel. I know you guys are a family-friendly call on the card itself, but ECW, if you recall, it was basically everything would be done on shotgun. Everything would pretty much be done on the spot. So I think in a lot of ways, maybe it's better that you and Simon don't spend hours and hours of time calling matches or getting ready to kind of know each other and kind of being able to piggyback off one another, or different moves in the match that you guys have to practice. I almost think then maybe this is going to make things even more interesting, because this could pretty much be a shotgun marriage to start things off literally August 7th.
Yeah, definitely. And I think seeing the chemistry grow and that first chemistry impact will be something to behold. I think we'll be able to tell a great story. Like I said, we both come from similar backgrounds in terms of interviewing. However, I think we're going to smash out the park. Like, Simon's incredible at what he does. I think between the two of us, we'll be able to tell some amazing stories with Odyssey Pro Wrestling.
Oh, I have no doubt that you guys are going to do that, because clearly everybody at Odyssey Pro Wrestling Wrestling knows what they're doing in terms of setting up this card, because this is a card now that we've been talking about it pretty much, I want to say, since WrestleMania. So it's been almost 3 months. As crazy as it sounds, I mean, it feels like yesterday, Kurt. It was WrestleMania, yet we've been talking about Odyssey Pro Wrestling now for almost 3 months. And talk about some of the matches here in the card. There's a few of them that I'm really excited about. We got to talk about a few of those matches so far. One of the matches that we spent a lot of time in talking on is the Natural Born Fighter RP Davis versus Scotty Rock and their war of words. And it's been really interesting to kind of see how these two guys are on this collision course. They're two completely different wrestlers, but yet they're similar in so many ways. Talk about maybe this match, and then we'll get into some other matches that I think will be really exciting for our worldwide audience to get into. Talk about the Natural Born Fighter RP Davis and Scotty Rock and calling that match.
So with that match in itself, that's probably one of the main matches I'm excited for. You mentioned in terms of the in-ring, they're different, but they're still very similar. And I have to agree with that, because when you have a look, we've just been going through a global pandemic. A lot of people have been suffering and a lot of people have been lacking that motivation. But you see RPD and you see Scotty Rock, they've both been going through the same program, Noosh, to get in the best shape of their life. So although what they do inside the ring is going to be different, their mentality, their hunger, the desire to be the best they can be, they're in the best shapes of their career. And we've just been locked down for over a year and a half. And I think that speaks for itself. And that's why I'm really excited for it. Like, so RP Davis has been absolutely killing it. Came through with Grand Pro, doing really good stuff, matches against like Lucas Steele. And I think his growth and some of the work that he's been putting in behind the scenes, there's a reason he's a natural born fighter. Like, you can't teach that. When you go with Scotty, I'd seen Scotty a lot for BWR before the pandemic, and he was part of the Rock and Call Express tag team champions, and I've been seeing him killing it, whether it's against grizzled young vets of NXT or against Nathan Cruz and Matt Myers in a TLC match. And he was incredible then. Now he's got in absolutely unbelievable shape. He's focusing on himself and his singles career. To me, these are two people to watch. RP Davis is destined for some great things, but I strongly believe Scott is going to be one of the breakout stars in British wrestling as we get back to things.
No question that I think that these two guys are on their way to bigger and better things. And obviously, RP Davis is a boxer. We've talked about here quite a bit on Sportnarium, because obviously the man behind Sportnarium was Trevor Lake, otherwise known as Lakey. And he's a boxing promoter. So we know RP Davis very well from the boxing world, but now we're seeing him evolve in the wrestling world. And Scotty Rock is also a guy that we know very well in the music world. So I think the two of them bring some really interesting dynamics here. And I think this is a match that a lot of people are going to be talking about here for quite a while. And speaking of someone else who's in phenomenal shape, and he was somebody we had on the show not too long ago, and that's 2-Bit. And 2-Bit now has an open challenge. And Kurt, I hope you stay as far away possible from 2-Bit, because 2-Bit right now is on a mission. And he was somebody that looked like he was on the verge of being a world champion in KOW. He's a guy that's had a lot of success. You've seen him in BWR, I know. So talk about your thoughts here on this new and improved 2-Bit and what we can expect when it comes to his open challenge.
In terms of what to expect, I don't know. Anybody could be answering that open challenge. However, it needs to be fine-tuned, because you mentioned 2-Bit's incredible. The stuff that I'd seen him in BWR, started winning titles there, and then again, he's somebody where he's finding his feet, taking his stride, making more of a name for himself, and then the pandemic halted all that. And you can see that with the chip on his shoulder. He thinks he's going to be one of the leading guys in Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and I think he's got the tools to do it. So I'm excited to see, but could he have like a bit more than he can chew? Like, you don't know who's going to answer that challenge. It could be somebody either a lot bigger with him, or it could be somebody a little bit more technically sound, or it could be somebody that mirrors him match to match in terms of his skill and ability. And although that's hard to do, we don't know who's going to be answering that call. So I'm really excited for this. It's going to be the unknown, and it will be interesting if he's going to regret issuing an open challenge.
We're going to certainly see, and it's a different 2-Bit than we're used to. And the Rat King now has Jennifer also as a component. So we're going to certainly see how that all develops. And we're obviously excited to see what happens with him and the rest of the card here in Odyssey Pro Wrestling. And a match that we haven't got to talk about, and I have a feeling, Kurt, that we're going to be talking about it here on next week's show. And that's Synergy versus the Freak Show. And now they have the Guiding Light, Isaiah Quinn, in their corner. And the Guiding Light, Isaiah Quinn is no stranger to this show. Synergy are no strangers to this show. And we've obviously had on the Unhinged Will Carter on the show here not too long ago as well. So we're very familiar with all of these components of this match. And this is a match, again, and I really don't know what to expect, Kurt. I mean, listen, we just talked about 2-Bit, his open challenge, but I think I can expect even less here when it comes to Synergy and the Freak Show, because it's two complete opposites. Then you have the guiding light, Isaiah Quinn, in their corner. So what's it going to be like calling this match, and what are you expecting from this?
Again, two complete opposites. You see Synergy, you see Troy Ryan and Anderson Daniels. Absolute massive. Like, physically, you're going to be struggling to matching them from show to show, but then your opponents, it's in the name, they're a freak show. You've got Isaiah Quinn, and I think with Isaiah being their voice and being the person kind of manipulating and kind of running things in the background, it's going to be an interesting dynamic. Like, he's an amazing talker. I imagine he's going to motivate the freak show massively for this one. And I think Synergy maybe overlook the freak show. Will they? Like, you've seen it in the promo, they've been talking about the Natural Born Fighters. Like, if you've been seeing that, whether it's the Cumbrian Outlaw. So yeah, part of me thinks they're already looking at Born Ready. Part of me already thinks they've been looking at Reese and Rogan. But the freak show, I think you can't predict what they're going to do, and you can't predict what Quinn's going to do.
I think Quinn is the wild card here in this match, because he's somebody that can really swing the outcome of this match. And he's somebody that he's as unpredictable as anybody you're going to see in there. And Synergy, of course, we thought Synergy was going to be matching up maybe with the team of Born Ready. We thought Synergy, like you mentioned, would be components with, let's say, a Reese and Rogan. But Reese and Rogan, it's sort of to be determined with them in Odyssey Pro Wrestling. We still don't have an answer when it comes to Reese and Rogan in Odyssey Pro Wrestling. But speaking of the team Born Ready, in the other half of the team of Born Ready, the Cumbrian Outlaw Rick Marcus, he's been announced most recently in a match with Lance Rivera. And this is going to be another very, very interesting match, because they're two completely different wrestlers. But I got to think, though, Kurt, and obviously you know Rick very well, you've had him on your show, this is a totally different Rick Marcus than the one that we saw in KOW, where he had a legendary feud with Sheriff Steele. I mean, this is a Rick Marcus right now that is on a mission. I mean, I think Lance Rivera barked up the wrong tree here when it comes to the Cumbrian Outlaw Rick Marcus. I mean, give us your thoughts on calling this match here between the Cumbrian Outlaw Rick Marcus and Lance Rivera.
I can see a trend happening when we're breaking down this card. Everybody is that polar opposite, and that's what makes it exciting, because it's clear that there's going to be that storytelling, because they're not going to be matching each other in any of these matches. And I think if you want a bigger description of how different these guys are, one's called the Cumbrian Outlaw and the other's called the Playboy Prince. I'm sorry, you're not getting much opposite there. And I think Lance is great. I've had Lance on the show, and he was somebody that had been doing really well. He'd been working on Strad, and then when the pandemic and the speaking out movement, it stopped him working from one place. And then he was with Fighting Spirit, which is James Drake and Zach Gibson school, and they announced that to close down because they moved to NXT. And I think he was even wondering what's next. And when he got the announcement, I'm like, you know what? With a couple of wins, Lance could get some great momentum behind him. But again, we spoke about RP Davis, we spoke about Scotty Rourke and the incredible shape they've been getting into, and Rick's been doing exactly the same. Rick's been transforming his body into the best shape he's ever been. He's been working day in, day out. I know him and RP Davis have been going to so many different seminars. They've been training non-stop, whether it's with the promo delivery or just with themselves as a new. I think that's why they're called Born Ready. I think that statement stands for whether it is tag team or a singles match. And Rick's got a lot to prove, and that could either be advantageous to Lance or it could be very bad for Lance, because Rick will want to go out there and prove he's one of the top guys in Odyssey Pro Wrestling. So I'm really excited again to see this one, because you can't say there's a definitive winner for any of these matches. And again, although everyone's all different, everybody's just hungry and everybody's wanting to prove themselves, not only in Odyssey Pro Wrestling or to themselves, but to the whole of British wrestling, because because there's an absurd statement that goes around British wrestling from some people on the internet saying British wrestling isn't dead. I think looking at the Odyssey Pro Wrestling roster prove that British wrestling isn't dead. Those that are saying it's dead and WWE have ruined it all, nonsense. Look at OPW, look at the card they've built, and look at the mentality and the hard work that everybody's put into for the last 18 months.
Dad, it's alive and well. It's thriving. And we've had on pretty much, I think at this point, Kurt, almost every wrestler that you've had on, I think over the past 5 or 6 months. And it's definitely not dead. In fact, in many ways, I'm more excited about the UK wrestling scene than I am here about some of the indies here in the States. So I think it is more than alive. It is thriving. And one of the reasons why it's thriving here is our guest on the Sports Report to kick off all the shows here this weekend on Sportnarium, the #1 global radio station. That is our very good friend, Kurt Johansson, who's going to be on the call here for Odyssey Pro Wrestling's inaugural event, August 7th, set sail in Morecambe. And I am the host of the Sports Report and the station manager here of Sportnarium, the Reverend Tom Bryson. Everybody can follow Sportnarium Radio on Twitter at SportnariumWW, on Instagram at Sportnarium. You can like us now on Facebook at Sportnarium Radio and Sportnarium Media. You can listen to us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at radio.com. You can catch the Sports Report Friday to Sunday, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. UK time. And also want to give a huge shout out to our very good friends over at 1310 Apparel, who are doing such a great job in terms of representing the pro wrestling scene, including the likes of the team of Born Ready, the Natural Born Fighter, and the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus. And you can go to 1310apparel.bigcartel.com and get a 30% discount on anything you buy from 1310 Apparel. All you have to do is when you go to checkout, put in the code SPORT30, caps lock SPORT30. So make sure you support the likes of the Natural Born Fighter, RP Davis, and the Cumbrian Outlaw, Rick Marcus. And you can also follow 1310 Apparel on Twitter at 1310APP. You can like them also on Facebook at 1310 Apparel. You can follow them on Instagram at 1310 Apparel. So make sure you go out and support those, like the 1310 Apparel has continued to support us. And also want to make sure everybody follows Kurt Johansson on Twitter at K Johansson Show. So make sure you get out there and listen to him. Also subscribe to his YouTube page. We'll obviously ask Kurt to plug that later on here, but want to make sure we support those who continue to support us. And most importantly, support the pro wrestling industry that we love and have become so used to here over the past several weeks and months. And Kurt Johansson is one of those reasons why. And Kurt, I wanted to also ask you about some of the other matches here that we haven't got a chance to talk about, because I know that there's a few other matches on this card that we haven't got a chance to dive into. And I think it shows the depth here of Odyssey Pro Wrestling and just on how many wrestlers, because I think, Kurt, at this point, we haven't got a chance to talk to everybody yet. But for our worldwide audience listening here on Sport Area, talk about a few other matches here that you're excited to see.
So one of the other matches that have been announced, obviously, mentioned, we've got Rick Marcus and Lance Rivera. We've got Synergy versus The Freak Show, 2-Bits Open Challenge and RPD versus Scotty Rourke. The Fatal 4-Way with Alexis Falcon versus Tonga versus Lizzie Evo versus Gia Adams. This is one of the matches I'm most excited to call. I think all 4 of these women are absolutely amazing what they do. And I think you've been seeing more and more of these popping up in many different companies and proving that they are some of the, I won't even say potential, because I think they're ready now. I think they are 4 absolute stars, and the fact they're all going to set sail in a Fatal 4-Way, again, matches you can't call. I think this is going to be an incredible match, and I'm really excited for it.
Absolutely. And Alexis Falcon, I feel like we're hearing more and more about across the pro wrestling scene, not just in the UK. And Gia Adams is another one, and everybody here. And I think that we're continuing to see a movement when it comes to women's pro wrestling. And I think Odyssey Pro Wrestling has got it right here. And this might be the match, Kurt, that might just steal the show. I mean, I know that Rick has a match and the Natural Born Fighter, RP Davis, and 2-Bit, but I got a feeling this women's match here might be the match to keep an eye on here. And I got to ask you then, Kurt, is there a match that you're most excited to call, or is there something you're looking for most when it comes to the card here, August 7th, set sail for Odyssey Pro Wrestling?
I think it's got to be that match, either that match or Happy Davis versus Scotty Rourke. Again, 2 people I know Davis have become friends with over the past year or so. Probably a big reason why I'm now involved with OPW, introducing me to Rick, and me and Rick hitting it off. So I think them 2, that's going to be a fantastic match. But I'm really excited at what this Fatal 4-Way is going to produce because they are just incredible. And that's not to take away from any of the other matches because the card is stacked. The card really is stacked of young, hungry talent that are going to prove themselves. And I think the fans that are going to be there for live attendance in Morecambe, obviously VIP is now sold out, which is an incredible achievement for a company that are about to do their first show. But I think whether you're going to be in-house or, I guess, listening to my voice, watching it, whether it's or on demand, I think it's going to be an amazing show. And I think a lot of people are going to take notice of this roster and the moves they're going to be doing for the remainder of 2021 and going into 2022.
Absolutely. No question about it. And I think it speaks volumes to the card here that Odyssey Pro Wrestling has, that the VIP has already sold out. And that speaks volumes also because we've just pretty much, for the most part, gotten out of the worst of a worldwide pandemic. There hasn't been much of pro wrestling in the UK really up until, I want to say, Kurt, the last week or so. I mean, so the fact that Odyssey Pro Wrestling was able to, no pun intended, weather all those storms, I think speaks volumes to what Odyssey Pro Wrestling has done here. I know Morecambe, we've talked about quite a bit, and how much it is meant to so many people to be able to be a part of the pro wrestling scene there and the history of it. And I know you being from Hull, and obviously with your show, you've talked about this quite a bit. I mean, for you, what does it mean to you to be a part of now Morecambe history in this card, August 7th?
You know what? I'm excited, and I think that's even more of a reason why I'm blessed for the opportunity. It's not a company that's on my doorstep in terms of like the local, and they're going to give me that opportunity. And the way Rick has spoken about the Morecambe fans, I'm really excited to see what they're like in the live attendance, and yeah, to be part of the history. And whether or not, like, whatever Odyssey Pro Wrestling goes on to do, hopefully I will be that person and the voice behind that for many years to come. But to be able to say I'm going to be calling their first ever match and the entirety of their first ever show, you can't take that away from myself and Simon, or you can't take that away from any of the amazing talent that's on this first card. You always remember those originals, and I guess that makes me an Odyssey Pro Wrestling original, being one of the commentators. So yeah, really excited, and I'm looking forward to hearing the crowd, as Rick's described. It's the crazy and he loves it there, and yeah, I'm excited. And obviously the plans I don't know if it's all been announced, and that's going to be exciting too.
Well, we'll certainly see what happens. We have a little bit of time between now and August 7th, so I'm sure there's a lot more surprises ahead with this card, and that's why, again, everybody needs to follow Odyssey Pro Wrestling on Instagram at Odyssey Pro Wrestling, like it on Facebook at Odyssey Pro Wrestling, follow it on Twitter at OPW_UK. So stay tuned. I'm sure there'll be many more announcements ahead here over the next coming weeks, and we'll definitely keep our fingers crossed to be able to talk about it here on the show. But Kurt, I've been meaning to ask you this question because obviously I've seen you now covered with your show talking about the commentating side, but I got to ask you, for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportnarium, what got you into wrestling?
You know what? I always struggle to give that definitive point because when I try and think of like my childhood, wrestling was a part of that. Whether it's playing with the figures or watching Monday Night Raw or watching my old videotapes of WrestleMania or Starrcade. I used to watch both of them, and these parts were, I knew this would probably be something I'd probably love for the rest of my life. And I think I was a huge Hulk Hogan fan in the early days, and then as the Attitude Era was happening and things like that, everybody loves Rock and Stone Cold, and I'll always remember the Hogan and Rock stare down and that promo that was delivered and the goosebumps. Like every time I listen to the promo between Rock and Hogan, it's goosebumps. It's like it's happening for the first time. And I think I'd have a couple of years away from wrestling where I used to keep an eye on what's happening. I still used to play the video games, but I didn't really watch it, whether that was lack of accessibility. We didn't have the Sky channels, and I think I was probably the only person in my friendship group that liked wrestling, so that made it a little bit hard. And then I just started embracing it again. I started embracing my hobbies and not caring what people thought. And after I did that, wrestling became an obsession. Like, I embraced it. I was watching as much wrestling as I could, whether that's British wrestling or wrestling in America, Japan, and more recently through the show, well, I covered something like 20 different countries over the last year and a half. And yeah, it's become an obsession.
What's that like? And you said something interesting, and I want to go back to it, that you've covered wrestling in 20 different countries. I mean, obviously, I'm in New York and you're in the UK, and we would not have connected without this medium, without this format. But you've had the opportunity now to connect with so many people that you would have never otherwise been able to connect with. What is that like, and what does that mean to you then, to be able to connect with all of those different wrestlers from all those different countries?
It's been amazing. It really has. And I think the friendships that I've built along the way have been genuine. Like when I started doing the content in Southeast Asia, I became good friends with Alexis Lee, the first Singaporean female wrestler, to the point when she knew my daughter was going to be born, she shipped some clothes and some, like a little card for my daughter. And the fact you've got somebody from the opposite side of the world thinking about you, thinking about your family and sending things over, like that's crazy. I don't think there's anything else in the world that brings people together like professional wrestling. And I think when I've been looking at the Nordic wrestling scene with Scandinavians, whether it's Sweden, Denmark, Norway, Finland, like the amount of people that give me credit for helping Scandinavians grow during this pandemic. Again, I don't like taking away from the people that are doing all the work, like those being inside the ring, but it's always been a nice feeling when wrestlers do message and say, after they've been on my show, they've had 2, 3, 4 different podcasts reach out wanting them to get on the show and the more attention. So yeah, making these friendships, making these connections across the world and learning different cultures, it's invaluable. And I think it's something everybody should embrace. I think, not to get too political, but all the hate that is in the world, it's ridiculous. It's unnecessary. Like at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And I think if you open up your mind to seeing different cultures and people's different backgrounds and things like that, there's nothing more satisfying where you see where people have come from, yet you still have this one common interest with each other, which is professional wrestling.
Kurt, I couldn't agree with you more, because you think about society, you think about what's going on in the world, and at the end of the day, our time is so short. It's so precious. People shouldn't be angry at one another. We should always find common ground, and that's why I've always said here on this show, a rising tide lifts all boats, and I have a very good feeling that Kurt Johansson is definitely a huge part of that rising tide, is going to lift a lot of people's boats. And Kurt, I got to ask you then, what got you into doing the show? I mean, obviously we've talked about all the great things that has come into terms of your interest in professional wrestling, and also obviously calling this card here with Odyssey Pro Wrestling. But after hearing your story, there was definitely a time lapse, it seemed, when it came to your interest in professional wrestling. And I was wondering, especially for our worldwide audience listening here on Sport Narrative, and especially your many, many fans out there, because you have a lot of fans on YouTube, Kurt. You have a lot of wrestlers who listen to you and speak with you. I mean, what got you into having your own show?
So I started training to be a professional wrestler in, let me think, it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago now. I'm with the local academy and I was doing quite well. However, at the same time, I was coaching professional football, i.e. soccer for the American audience. That was my full-time professional job. And I was also playing, and I'd got a couple of injuries that didn't help, and work wasn't happy that I was getting injured playing football. So I had to do the decision of, well, am I going to keep training to wrestle, or do I put my career first? And at that point, I had a good opportunity coaching football at the time. So that was paying the wages. So I had to focus on that. But I still had the itch, and I still had the edge, so I was still helping out on the shows. And I started writing articles for Indie Corner, a site over here in the UK, and I started enjoying that. And then some people decided they wanted to create a podcast, and I got invited to be part of that, which is now, we started off as Wrestle Thoughts podcast, and now they're known as Ringsiders, which they've gone on to do some amazing things. And I was a part of that up until last year, and it was probably about a year and a half ago I started, nearly 2 years out now actually, I started what was originally called Kurt's Angle Podcast, to play on my name and obviously the great Kurt Angle. And I was just doing it from my own perspective. I had some frustrations in terms of Ringsiders, like too many cooks in the kitchen kind of thing. And so I had something where I could do my own narrative. I started looking at all these different wrestling scenes. I started looking at lives of trainee wrestlers as well, where they may have only had a handful of matches, if that. And I enjoyed telling those stories. And when it came up to the speaking out movement, we'd taken a break. I took a break from Kurt's Angle podcast, and it wasn't working. I didn't think it was working with me being at Ringsiders, and despite being founder of that, I thought I need to step away. It wasn't good. So I was like, right, what am I going to do? And I kind of knew I wanted to be something in wrestling. Again, at this point, I didn't know what role I wanted to take up. So I thought, how can I get my name out there? Because other than my first name, everybody's just going to think of Kurt Angle with the name. So that's when I was like, right, it's going to be the Kurt Johansson show. And that's when like different wrestlers that are hugely respected over the wrestling scene, they was like, that's good, go with it, get your name out there. And I think it has, like, I think since the rebrand and the debut, I think what would have been August of last year, I've been involved in what Odyssey is going to be the fourth company where I've done something for. And they're the ones that I'm kind of signed with for next year or so. And that's not to say I'm not going to work with whether it is Feast Females or Wrestle Carnival or Pro 2 in Scotland. But yeah, that was my route. That was the way I got started in the podcasting. And that's just how, with little transitions and those little changes, I've started finding who I am in terms of a personality, I guess, and what route I wanted to take in professional wrestling.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is why Kurt Johansson is going to be the next Jim Ross, the next Tony Schiavone, because he clearly knows what he's doing, and he's even got a little bit of experience in the ring. And Kurt, I've got to then ask you this question, because you're different than even, let's say, an Ethan Edwards, where you have that experience of training in the ring. Or you're certainly different than a Jim Ross, a Tony Schiavone, a Michael Cole. You're more than on the side of, let's say, a Josh Matthews, who was calling matches for a while for Impact, or an Excalibur with AEW. Not to say that obviously, you were in the WWE, but you've been in a Rick Marcus's shoes. You've been in a Synergy's shoes. So you understand what it's like to be in the ring. Do you think also that the wrestlers have a little bit more of an appreciation and a respect for you because you've actually been in their shoes? You're not just some fan. You're not just somebody that's kind of just hanging around. You don't understand things, because I'm not a professional wrestler. I would be the first to admit that. I haven't been in those shoes, but you, my friend, have been in those shoes. Do you think also when it comes to the roster, especially here at Odyssey, that you have a little bit more credibility and respect because you've done what they're doing?
I'm not too sure, to be honest, because it was, again, many moons ago. I didn't even get to the debut stage because I, again, had to make those decisions of my body and so I can continue coaching football. I did a few training sessions at the time with Reese and Rogan. That was cool. And I don't know what it is. I don't know. Like, it's one of those, I don't like bigging myself up all the time and things like that. It's just common theme is the way I kind of conduct the interviews, and I think my understanding of professional wrestling from looking at such a variety of it over the years. And again, although I wasn't wrestling, a lot of the times I was in the car with people going to shows, helping set up the ring, watching the matches closely and things like that. So I'd like to think that gives me a little bit of edge of trying to understand the way wrestling works. But wrestling is so subjective, and I think even if you've not trained or if you've not been involved, and if you are just a fan, because still I think I class myself more as a fan than somebody that's been in wrestling. I just think the way you get respect and the acknowledgement from peers and people who are in wrestling is the way you conduct yourself. You mentioned you've not trained or anything like that, and that doesn't make you any less than somebody that has, because the way you conduct yourself and the way you build your show is what gives you respect. And I think that's the key thing. It's just showing people respect, conducting yourself professionally, taking your time out to learn what's happening and people's background and stuff like that. So yeah, I'd still say I'm more of a fan, and I'm just excited to actually be getting involved in more of an official capacity.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is why everybody needs to follow Kurt Johansson on Twitter at K Johansson Show and find out why he is definitely one of the best fans around. It's his words, not mine. I still think of him as somebody that knows a thing or two about professional wrestling, and that's why we're extremely honored to have him here on the Sports Report for a few more minutes. And I am the host of the Sports Report and the station manager here of Sportnarium Radio, the Reverend Tom Bryson. We're talking all things related to Odyssey Pro Wrestling, August 7th, set sail event in Morecambe. Of course, one more time, everybody can follow Odyssey Pro Wrestling on Twitter at OPW_UK, Instagram at Odyssey Pro Wrestling. You can like them on Facebook at Odyssey Pro Wrestling and find out why the VIP is sold out and why there's only a few tickets left, ladies and gentlemen, only a few more tickets. minutes to find out why we're more excited about Odyssey Pro Wrestling than SummerSlam at this point and Slammiversary. We're not even thinking about that, ladies and gentlemen. We're ready for set sail. So we wish we could be there in Morecambe, but until then, we're going to talk with Kurt and obviously talk with, I'm sure, many more people on the Odyssey Pro Wrestling roster when it comes to this outstanding event that they've put together. And Kurt, I got to ask you about, speaking about fans, because there was somebody that you did interview that I would have to say that you did interview more of as a fan. And that was somebody who's probably, I got to say, might be the biggest person you've had on the show. And that was Connor of Ascension. Everybody knows Connor of Ascension when he was in the WWE. And I always thought that Ascension should have got a little bit more of a spotlight than it did. It looked like when they first debuted on Raw, they were on their way to probably having a long run as tag team champions, but didn't quite pan out. But Connor of Ascension, still, what an honor that was to be able to speak with him. So I got to ask you then, for a worldwide audience listening here on Sport Marion, what was it like having Connor of Ascension on the Kurt Johansson show?
It was surreal, not going to lie. I think you hit the nail on the head. They should have done so much more with the Ascension on WWE television, and to hear his stories and things, like, I still showed I was a fan of his work, and I felt that was appropriate at the time, because I feel when you've just come out of a long-term contract, like, they'd been in WWE for years, and it was just a case of showing my admiration and, look, what you guys do is amazing. And I think some of the stories that he was telling was very eye-opening. And then I had the pleasure of interviewing Victor off the back of it. Victor had listened to the interview with Connor, and he wanted to, I reached out to him and he was like, yeah, I'd love to come on. And then what Victor was saying was even more eye-opening into the world of WWE and how things was planning out. And to have those two names, I'm excited for them. Connor is somebody that I still chat to from time to time through Facebook, and I just managed to get him booking in the UK for like an online dojo. So he's doing a lot of training in Tampa. I put him in touch with somebody that's doing the dojo where I got to speak to Hector Guerrero, the Luke King Sharp dojo, the LKS dojo. And it was this past Sunday that Connor was on there, and the feedback I'd got, I wasn't part of it because I was unavailable, was amazing. Like, himself as a coach is incredible. So it was an amazing opportunity. I think the fact that Victor then came on after I spoke to Connor, I couldn't have shit the bed too much because Victor came on. So no, I really enjoyed it.
Is there any wrestlers currently that you would like to speak to that you think would maybe come on the show?
That I think would come on the show? It's hard to say, to be honest. I don't know what direction my show is going to go to. Somebody I'd love to speak to, whether it's unrealistic, obviously Kurt Angle's a big one. He does actually follow the show, and we've traded a few messages over the past year or so. But I think Sean Waltman, X-Pac, I've been quite vocal about my struggles with mental health in the past, and his show was kind of like inspiration of doing a podcast. I used to always listen to that, and it was what was helping me get to counselling and when I was hit rock bottom. So I'd actually sent in like an email about the show and how it had helped. It got read out, and X-Pac kind of spoke a lot about like my mental health and things on his show, and which was an amazing feeling. And then I think it was like 6 months to a year later, I go to All In Chicago, and I get to meet X-Pac. And he was just so happy, the fact that I turned my life around. I'm due to get married 2 days after we set sail. And he was just so happy. He was such a wholesome person. And yeah, so Sean Waltman, that one person I'd love to get on the show.
Absolutely. Somebody that has a lot of stories in the wrestling industry, I'm sure. And he was somebody we talked about on last week's show quite a bit, actually, because it's actually coming up on the 27th anniversary of his match on Monday Night Raw, the 1-2-3 Kid versus Bret the Hitman Hart for the then World Championship in the WWF. And it was a rare Monday Night Raw championship match. And it was probably to this day still one of the best matches in Monday Night Raw history. So that's an excellent guest. That's actually somebody that I would definitely want to hear you speak with, because he's got a lot of stories. And he's actually in the Hall of Fame twice. And Kurt, he's actually technically got the opportunity to get in the Hall of Fame 2 more times. Well, actually 3 more times, right? Because he could get inducted as 6th, Pac, he can get inducted as the 1-2-3 Kid, and he can get inducted as X-Pac. So I guess he could theoretically be a 5-time member of the WWE Hall of Fame. But Kurt, you mentioned family, and congratulations to you also on your upcoming marriage. And that's a tremendous feat. That's a tremendous accomplishment. And obviously, God bless you and your soon-to-be wife. And I know you also had a child here, and congratulations also on that. And I was also wondering on how has a family shaped your career?
I've got to be less selfish, I guess. Now, it's not just like my fiance, it's my daughter that I've got to think about. And I think that's why my content has reduced with the Johansson show, just because I was lucky. Like, my employer gave me 6 months off as a parental leave, fully paid. So I didn't have to worry about finances. I could just be there with my daughter. And now that I've gone back to work and I'm contracted to like 37 hours, but a lot of the time I'm doing 45, including travel, like 50 hours a day. It limits what spare time I've got. So a lot of that I do spend with my daughter. So I can't be going to wrestling shows every single weekend, because to me, like, being a dad is the number one priority. Like, my daughter's my number one priority. So that kind of shapes it up. But my fiance has been really supportive in my show when I was having doubts about myself, or when I was contemplating going as a solo podcast. It was her that was inspiring me to do it. She's my number one fan. She doesn't like wrestling. She doesn't understand wrestling, but she still supports me. And I think the fact that she's allowing me to travel down to Morecambe 2 days before my wedding to go do the commentary, set sail on the 7th of August, I think that just, again, sings the praises of my fiance of like how amazing she's been throughout it.
Kurt, you married the right person. You got the right bride there, because listen, let me tell you something. I'm from New York, and I don't know too many women that would even tolerate that, or even too many women that would want to stand with somebody that's as huge as professional wrestling fan as you are, and certainly I am. So you are a very lucky man, and congratulations to you, and congratulations also on your daughter. So you are definitely on your way to bigger and better things, my friend. So listen, your soon-to-be wife knows that Kurt Johansson is on his way to being the next Jim Ross, the next Tony Schiavone, the next Michael Cole. Well, maybe not so much Michael Cole, because I've never been the biggest Michael Cole fan. But let's stick with Jim Ross then and Tony Schiavone. I think I'd rather prefer Josh Matthews even than Michael Cole. Something about Cole that's always rubbed me the wrong way. Kevin Kelly would be a good one. Kevin Kelly I always thought was very good, especially in Japan. So that's another name we could throw out there. But Kurt, we know that you're a very busy man. You're getting ready for all these great things that you have going on, especially August 7th set sail, and also your family and everything else that you're working on. But for our worldwide audience listening here on Sportnarian, I wanted to ask you if there were 2 or 3 moments, or it could be 2 or 3 interviews that stand out most in your career so far.
That's a hard one. With it being 2 or 3, I'll say my venture into the different wrestling scenes around the world, whether it's my interview with Shaukat, the first Malaysian pro wrestler that hit well over 1,000 views on YouTube, which was ridiculous to me, or like being able to have these contacts where I might be able to do certain things with companies in like Sweden and Denmark. So I think that's one of my standouts, what the body of work that I've put out there that's showcasing wrestling scenes. Like I mentioned, over 20 different nations. Like I've had Malaysia, I've had Singapore, I've had Taiwan, China, Puerto Rico, Mexico. There's an abundance of Hungary, Malta, France. There's so many different countries out there. And I think that's got to be one of my standout. Second standout moment, I'd say my WWE press interview that I did. And when NXT UK came to Hull, I'd got to interview one of their employees at the time, one of the wrestlers. I'm not going to mention his name because he's no longer with the company. He's no longer in professional wrestling because of the disgusting things that he did. But I think the whole, when I look back at my emotions when I was doing it, and the opportunity to do a press interview with WWE, that's got to be a standout moment. And I think third is just my work showcasing that British wrestling isn't dead, where again I've had people the likes of Joel Redman or Dean Ormack, 2 of the best to lace the boots, put me over as a show and suggest different guests. And the work that I've been doing, like I mentioned Fierce Females, I've been doing Fierce Females Focus. at the end of last year, and that could be something I could be doing for these females in the future, based in Scotland. I'd been teaming with Aisha Raymond. There's been Wrestle Carnival. I've done a lot of interviews exclusively for Wrestle Carnival on their YouTube content. Pro 2, a new company in Scotland. I've been doing their graphics for them. I've been doing some of the videos, and I've been doing some talent scouting, and there could be some different roles I might be doing with them in the future. And yeah, I think the biggest standout moment though, and I'm not just putting them over because it's what we've been talking about, I think I'm getting paid to do a role in professional wrestling. In the fact I'm going to be one of the commentators for Odyssey Pro Wrestling. That's my standout moment. I'm so grateful for the opportunity they've given me, and I hope I do them justice, and I'm just excited to see the talent and be able to help them tell a story.
A rising tide lifts all boats, and clearly Kurt Johansson is definitely that rising tide. We got a feeling there's going to be many, many more moments ahead for Kurt Johansson. That's why everybody needs to follow him one more time on Twitter at K Johansson Show, Instagram at the Kurt Johansson Show. You can also follow him on Instagram as well at Kurt Johansson _. So listen, find out why he's on his way, just like everybody at Odyssey Pro Wrestling. And for you, my friend, I want to give you the floor. I want to give you any closing thoughts. I also want you to plug, even though we've plugged it already, I want you to plug all of your social media, anything else that could also include your YouTube page or anything else you want to say to your many fans out there and subscribers on YouTube, along with anything to the Odyssey Pro Wrestling universe. And it's been a tremendous honor to be able to talk with you on this journey and be able to set sail with you until we get to August 7th. So I obviously cannot thank you enough. So for you, my friend, I want to give you the floor. Any closing thoughts? Anything else you want to share? Please plug anything else you like. And I can't thank you enough. And the floor is yours, my friend.
First of all, Tom, thank you for having me on the show. It's been amazing. Like, I've been a fan of your work for what you've been doing with Odyssey Pro Wrestling, putting it over, and I'm grateful to be able to kind of like tell my story and again talk about going into the commentary world. It's not something I've really done apart from post that was announced for myself and Simon, and I still think it's quite surreal. We get told that's been the post with the most interaction for Odyssey Pro Wrestling. So the fact that so many people was excited for us, puts the pressure on myself and Simon, I'm not going to lie. I think people are expecting big things, but nah, I'm excited. Like, if you are a fan of the podcasting and the interviews, have a look at the K Johansson Show on YouTube. I am on the audio devices as well, but there's currently 101 videos on YouTube over the past year and a half. And even if some people aren't interested in wrestling as much, or you wanted to see other personalities, like one of my interviews with Emily Hayden, it was my first interview to set the K Johansson Show off. And Emily is somebody, since interviewing, like, she's one of my closest friends. We've both been there for quite a lot, and we actually got to collaborate a lot as well. We did some stuff regarding Dungeons and Dragons where we called it Dungeons and Wrestling, with Ian Skinner, myself and Emily Hayden doing a twist on that. Or we've got a show with 2 episodes up at the moment called That Random Show. Again, go check those out, or just the list of the interviews I've done, whether it's try and have a look at one of the scenes that you might not be aware of, or somebody that you've never even heard of before, because the stories are so unique. And I think if you do, it'll become an obsession like it has for me to just have a look into different wrestling scenes. So again, Tom, thank you for having me on the show. Everybody, you can follow me at K Johansson Show, the K Johansson Show on Instagram, the K Johansson Show on Facebook. You can have a look on there. Things have been quiet. It'll probably be a little bit more quiet up until after my debut with Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and then my wedding on the 9th. So 9th of August, that is. So hopefully the back end of August, I can start getting up. I've got a few guests reaching out that I wanted to come on the show. So hopefully I can bring those to you sooner rather than later. But in the meantime, there's a huge backlog of interviews that you can have a look through. And yeah, feel free to just pop up and say hi. Like, let's talk wrestling. Let me know what you're excited for. Let me know if you're going to be at the show, Odyssey Pro Wrestling, 7th of August in Morecambe. Doors are at 6 p.m, VIP 5:30. But again, they're sold out. An amazing achievement. And I'm just so excited to set sail.
Absolutely. And we got a very good feeling that we have not heard the last of the Kurt Johansson Show. So I have a very good feeling about that, and it will definitely be well worth the wait until we see the return of the Kurt Johansson Show coming up here later this summer. And for you, my friend, congratulations on your daughter. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding. Congratulations on being on the call for Odyssey Pro Wrestling August 7th. I'm looking forward to seeing the future and all the great things that you're going to accomplish. And anytime we can ever have you on the show, the door will always be open. And I'm looking forward to speaking with you soon, and congratulations.
No, thank you very much. And again, keep up the amazing work, and I'd love to come back on in the future.
We'll definitely make it happen as we are here on the Sports Report, the #1 global sports show with an announcer for Odyssey Pro Wrestling, and that's Kurt Johansson. As I am the host of the Sports Report and the station manager here of Sportnarium Radio, the Reverend Tom Bryce, and we were just with Kurt Johansson, announcer for Odyssey Pro Wrestling, also host of the Kurt Johansson Show. And stay tuned for more on the Sports Report and on Sportnarium. So as we were just with Kurt Johansson of Odyssey Pro Wrestling and also the host of the Kurt Johansson Show. So it's the host of the Sports Report, the Reverend Tom Bryce. So stay tuned here on Sportnarium and on the Sports Report.